Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Green. I'm going to be your host today for the September 2021 housing market update. Thanks for joining us. Let's jump right into our slides here so we can talk about where things are currently are in the housing market and where things are headed. That's what we like to do for you each month. So here's a quick look at our panel that we're going to hear from in just a few minutes. But let's jump right in. This set really sums it up the best, this quote by the Deputy Chief Economist of First American. We are seeing some signs of softening in the housing market, but context is important here. We're still very much in a seller's market, but we are seeing early signs of softening. I completely agree with that statement, and we're going to show you why that is. So the context is the important part, right? You got to think back before the pandemic hit. Where were we? We were in a very robust market. It wasn't as many realtors would describe it, insane as it became during the pandemic, but we were at a very strong place in the market. Now, this chart here are numbers from showing time, which is the system that the vast majority of real estate agents around the country utilize to book, schedule their showings, so on and so forth, okay? And right now, where we left off in July of 2021, because those are the most recent numbers we have, was at a metric of 189.4. July of 2019, right, which was a very strong market before the pandemic, was at 123. So although showings are declining and it's softening, it's still at a level above that of where we were before the pandemic hit. So it's still a very strong seller's market in terms of showings. Let's keep going. This is a percentage of homes that are selling over list price. June of 21 was 50.4%. July was a tick down from there, right? Both of which were still much higher than that of the previous year, which was 26.8%. Now, as you can remember, the pandemic really became a thing in the early spring of 2020. Things were kind of shut down there for a while, and then ultimately it got cooking. So I think that this is maybe not the best metric because it really started to ramp up in terms of sales, right? Because you have to think of the sales transaction, real estate, they take a little while to close. You know, it's not like walking into a candy store and buying a candy bar. You can't just walk in, pay money, and you get the candy bar. It doesn't work like that in real estate. There's all sorts of title searches that need to happen, so on and so forth, right? So this is a little bit of a delay, but needless to say, you can see that the market difference between the two. All right. New monthly listing counts. In other words, new homes that are coming to the market. This has been the big discussion now for years, lack of inventory, and it became even tighter and more intense during the pandemic. But what you can see here, the green line is 2021, current year. Pandemic year is in orange. You can see it dropped off with the shutdowns and everything that happened, and then it came back on, but it never really came back to a level of previous years, okay? So you can see here, the green line is actually increasing over the pandemic level and has been, it's kind of flattening out here, but it'll be interesting to see as this market softens whether or not inventory levels come back to us. So we'll keep an eye on that, of course. So the bigger discussion is affordability, right? That's really what it comes down to always is, can people afford to buy a home? Now, affordability or the lack thereof is on the rise, meaning homes are becoming less affordable. That is true, okay? So in other words, earlier this year, it was more affordable to buy a home than it is right now. But again, let's have perspective and let's make sure that we understand the factors that are going into all of this. Now, when you look at the housing affordability index from 1990 to today, the higher the bar, the more affordable a house is in terms of real wages, cost of living, so on and so forth, right? So the cheapest time to own a home in this chart was 2012, right? That was the most affordable time to own a home. It has come down since that time. It, had a little bit of a blip here in 2020 because rates were so low, right? So it became more affordable and it's dropped. in 21. It's definitely dropped. However, when you look in perspective of the last, 30 some odd years here, it's still at a very high level compared to everything before the financial crisis occurred. So we're still at a very affordable time. And then when you compare that to the idea of renting, right? Because everything in life is about opportunity cost, right? In other words, I'm doing what I'm doing now, and that's taking up time and bandwidth in my life from doing something else. What is that something else, and what is the cost for not doing that something else? That's what opportunity cost means. And I always like when I'm dealing, with first-time buyers and whatnot, to help them understand that while it may seem cheaper on a monthly basis to you to be renting, your life is really in the hands of other people. You have very little control over one of the major cost components of your life, which is housing. So look at what has happened with the cost of rent from 1988 to 2020. I mean, it is a sharp increase here, and it is only going up and up as inflation starts to increase here. The rents are they're going up. I see it all over the place. It's happening. So it's just not a good position to be in terms of being a long-term renter. The goal for everybody should be to own their own home, if at all possible. I know that there are certain scenarios that just simply will not allow that, but for the most part, everybody should have that goal of home ownership, and we certainly do on the Housing Market Update. Quite frankly, that's why we do what we do here. We want to educate people to help them get into homes. So the percentage of income needed for a mortgage payment increases as home prices continue to climb, right? Now, the historic norm for the percentage of income needed to run your household in terms of principal, interest, taxes, and insurance has been 21.2%. In general, and we're going to hear from Laura Moritz, mortgage originator, in a little bit. In general, the banks and whatnot really kind of want to see you at a 25% ratio. In other words, 25%, no more than 25% of your income is going towards your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay. But on average, we're still very much below that 25% number, and we're still below the historic norm of 21.2%, despite the fact that rates are increasing and prices are increasing at the same time. Okay, so it's still historically an affordable time to buy a home. Okay, so I love this here. Homes are less affordable, but not unaffordable. Okay, homes are less affordable right now, but they're not unaffordable. So that's the key thing to keep in mind. So the advice really is, if you're a buyer and you do not yet own a home, keep going. Don't stop. Now's a good time to buy. So 5 reasons today's housing market is anything but normal, because it definitely is an abnormal market. Mortgage rates. Rates are still historically very low. When you look at by decade, the 70s, 8.8 was the average rate. The 80s, 12.7. Those are the times when people will tell you stories. Yeah, I remember when my rate was 18% or 20%. I mean, it's like hard to wrap your head around a 20% interest rate. But it's true. There were rates that high. The average was for the decade was almost 13%. So when you take a look at the 2010s, 4.09%, and where we are in today's terms, it's still very low, right? We haven't finished the decade of the 20s, so therefore we can't, show you that number. But rates are about there, right? In general terms. So, and also here's annual home price appreciation. It has been roaring in the last couple of years. 14.1% in the last 12 months, basically, almost a 15% rate of increase of home appreciation is really remarkable. But the average over the course of this period is about 4%, which is the rule of thumb in real estate, that your house over the course of your lifetime is going to appreciate by about 4% year over year. So, when you take a look at, this housing crisis that we had and just how terrible it was and how long it lasted, at some point it had to snap back, right? So there was that, and then you compound it with the pandemic and the mass exodus of people from the inner cities out into the suburbs, creating demand in those places. It was really the perfect storm for appreciation. And we saw that over the last 12 months. But I think we're going to start to see a much lesser percentage of appreciation. Although I think we all agree that prices will continue to increase, just not on as high of a percentage basis. Months of inventory, lack thereof in terms of inventory, it's still a problem. 2.6 months is a normal inventory number is six months of inventory. That's kind of a healthy market, so to speak. So we've been way down below that 6 level, right? You can see here would be 6 right about here. We've been below that for some time now, and this area is more normal. But you can see it is coming up. Okay, so that actually is a good thing. The slowing of this market is a good thing. It's not healthy to be in such a turbulent marketplace for too long. So the softening is a good thing. Days it takes to sell a home, days on market, has been very aggressive, meaning low, for the past couple years here, especially during the pandemic. You can see here's January of 2020, and it just came way down. But it's been steady, and it's not continuing to decrease. So again, another sign that although it's still a very strong seller's market, it is stabilizing a bit here. And number 5 is the number of offers per listing. Just taking a look at how many offers still are coming in on listings. Not as many as there once were, right, at the earlier part of the year, but still a very strong number, 4.5 offers on average nationally per listing. Is a lot. That's a lot. This I also find to be interesting too. George, senior economist at Realtor.com, he's expecting an unusual busy fall season. Sellers are putting homes on the market. Normally this activity happens in early spring. That is true. And a lot of sellers are now putting their house on the market. I can tell you that there have been, from my own personal perspective, many agents have been coming in with listings, and sellers are getting a little bit uneasy because now they're putting their homes in the market and it's not selling right away, and they might have to do some price reductions. So, people are now aware that this market may, the euphoria of these buyers and, just all of these offers coming in is behind us at this point. And so now it's time to start to get a little bit more real. And if you were thinking about selling, you got to get on it because this market is softening. Now, I pulled this annual inflation rate chart just because I think it's important that we keep our eye on inflation. I've been talking about that in the last couple housing market updates. And I, as a business person, I'm not all that old, right? And my business, real estate brokerage business is 16 years old this year. So I didn't operate in these wild times here back in the 80s. So this is my first real high inflation, rising inflation period. And I'm learning as I go through it. But what you can see is that it's been fairly stable now since the mid 80s. There hasn't been a huge tumultuous up or down. Now, this here is the housing crisis that occurred, right? Which inflation just drastically decreased, but then it came back and it stabilized, right? But look at where we are now. I mean, this is a large increase. Okay, this is a very large increase in a very short amount of time. And I think we're all starting to see signs of it, and just in little places. And when you walk this line back, just follow my little cursor there, this is the highest level that it has been since the mid 80s. So it's significant. This inflation that we're seeing now is significant. And it's interesting for me as an entrepreneur to see how it's impacting me with, there's a lot of pressure on wages right now because people need to have more money to be able to live their lives, and employers are really being squeezed to increase wages. But our revenue is not necessarily increasing. So it's really putting a lot of pressure on profits. I can just see how inflation is really, a negative force in a lot of respects for everybody, right? Because as an employee, you might be making more, but you're spending more money at the supermarket, at the gas pump, to buy a car, for rent, this, that, the other thing. So it's really not a pretty picture for anybody. So we'll keep our eye on that. Let's go over to the hard stats that we show you every month. I think there's something interesting in here too. Taking a look at this pink line here, that is 2021, this current year. You can see things are kind of settling down here. When you actually take a look at the raw numbers, this month of July was actually a tick down from where it was in 2020, which this is the 2020 line here. So, again, the raw numbers actually show us back up these statements from everybody that are commenting here that I'm showing you. And even home price, you can see that it took off in the pandemic. Look at this variance here between these 2 years, right? This is 19 in blue, 20 in this orange, yellowish, goldish color here. It really took off and it set sail on it, and it started again this year. But now you see it leveling off here a little bit, right? It'll be interesting to see how this line converges and maybe comes down, and over the course of time they will converge. So again, signs of softening and months of inventory. Again, the raw numbers show us that months of inventory is increasing, which means that the market is softening. Okay, so the numbers back up all these statements. All right, some housekeeping before we get to our panel. The next housing market update is Tuesday, the 19th at noon. You can stay in touch with us at hmupdate.com. And if you register and whatnot, you can get an automatic reminder that the housing market update is going to come, and you can join the webinar and ask questions, this, that, the other thing. And a special thanks to NewOp, our sponsor. Check this one out. In the past 30 days, over 10 million in sales volume for real estate mortgages has been exchanged between members. This little community we have going is cooking. If you are a real estate agent and or a mortgage banker and you are not a member of NewOp, you are missing the boat. Join it. Sign up, newop.com. All right, here's our panel. Here's a quick look. We're going to come back to their contact information in just a little bit. Let's join them visually right now. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here, Laura, Robert, and Carol. Let's start out. Laura is our mortgage professional here, and we're going to end the discussion with the mortgage. So, Laura, we're going to come back to you in just a little bit. Thanks for bearing with us. But Carol and Robert, let's get right into it. Carol, your thoughts. You've been on many of these housing market updates with me. Before the pandemic hit, we were talking about where the marketplace was going, and it was a very strong market. I actually asked for your prediction early in 2019. Is this going to be another solid year? What's going to happen? And you said, yes, it's going to be a strong year. It's not slowing down. And you didn't know what was coming, but you were right. So where do you think things are now? I mean, do you agree with all this, that the market is softening? Do you see it?
Definitely, I think the market is softening. There's, before it was a feeding frenzy. House came on the market and there'd be multiple offers, but now that is not the case. The homes aren't selling as quickly as they were before, and it's not the multiple offer situation, but it's still a great time to sell a home. There's still a lot of interest. There's a lot of buyers out there. And going back to your comment about renting versus owning, 100% you should buy a home for the security of it, the financial foundation that it gives you. But now the market is good, just not the frenzy it was, which makes it nicer for buyers.
Yeah. So Carol, for everybody who's here listening, she operates her business in the New York metro area, the Hudson Valley region of New York. We also have Robert Lang here, who is from the Kansas and Missouri area, more specifically the Kansas City area. So Robert, do you agree with the sentiment of this presentation? Are you seeing the same thing in the Kansas City area as well?
Yes, I agree with your stats as presented, as well as Carol's remarks. Pretty much identical here in Kansas. We just have a little bit different scenario as to why it's that way. We have building permits that are going at about 25% of what they should be over the past 5 years. And so our housing shortage is causing these ridiculously high appreciation rates. Some of them have gone up when the average house right now, as far as a starting home, is $250,000. It was $180,000 last year.
Wow.
So just a tremendous change. And yes, it's definitely softening. yes, it's definitely having fewer offers, and yet I had a listing that just had 2 offers that came in. It just took 3.5 weeks to get there.
Right.
For them, they're hearing everywhere on the news that prices are going to be coming down. They think they're going to come down. And after waiting a few weeks and going homeless for a few weeks, they've decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing for anybody who's actually, going to listen to what we have to say is that, if you're a buyer, prices are not going to come tumbling down. And if you're a seller, prices are not going to continue to appreciate at a 15% rate. It's just not going to happen, So everybody needs to be realistic, I think, and as far as sellers go, it's always a good idea to try to price your home at the current market rate, and a realtor is the best person to help you get there, right? Because they have all the comps and the information to be able to do that. And to try to go it alone is a real risk because you could be leaving money on the table, or you could price it too high and not get any action and allow good offers to go by when you're in a marketplace like we are now where things are softening. Maybe the offer you get next week is going to be better than the offer you get 3 months from now. We just don't, you never know what the future holds, but okay. Now I'm curious, Robert, down there in the Kansas City area, are you having any issue with appraisals? This is always something I'm curious to know about because anytime market shifts happen, appraisals seem to be maybe kind of an indicator of what's coming. Are appraisals coming in low, not appraising for the amount that the deals are for? Do you anything about appraisals?
Essentially, the appraisers understand the market. Real estate is local. So you have local situations that dictate this, and the considerable housing shortage here is dictating the fact that the appraisers are simply writing on the appraisal that this appears to be an appropriate demand price for this property in light of no other options available to them. There are options right now and many price points, and with those features are take it or leave it, not choosing between 10 homes, 20 homes, 50 homes. That's how low the inventory is. So the appraisers just add that little clause in on the appraisal report that due to low inventory, this appears to be a good appraisal for it.
Okay. All right. So I think the takeaway is that from New York to Kansas City, the realtors sense that the market is softening. It seems to be well known at this point that things are settling down. Things are going back into place. And I haven't seen any metrics or analytics out there about this, but my sense is that, and I've been saying this now for a few months, people are being called back into work physically, into their offices. One thing that was very interesting for me through this whole thing is I thought for sure we were going to see a major bubble burst in commercial real estate because companies were going to pull out of their office leases. Landlords of large commercial spaces were going to be holding the bag. And I just don't see that as having happened. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but I think the employers are, if they're not already, they're intending to bring people back into the office, which means that people need to go back into the cities that they were living in and, re-engage with the apartments or the condos or, whatever, however their structure is, wherever they were living. So I think there's something to be said there too. And it's taking the pressure off the suburbia and the rural areas, right? Because there's simply not enough inventory to accommodate the population of the urban centers out in the suburbs, right? We would just need to build far more homes to accommodate everybody. So I think it's leveling out now. People are maybe transitioning back into the urban areas. Okay.
A lot of the people that didn't have a home to go to, as far as moving up, they were wanting to move up to have home offices.
Yep.
And with the low inventory, they aren't finding those homes. And because of that, they're ready to go back to the office.
Right.
They're tired of working around the kids having their schooling going on, and they have to step over there and be part of that assignment process and They need to have their quiet space or they can't perform their job. And
Yeah,
that creates
you're
another
right.
issue.
You're right. And a lot of these people who came out of these urban areas, they had a much higher level of income than the people in the suburban and rural areas did. So they could just buy a house. They didn't have to rent something. They could afford to buy, even if it was means I'm only going to own it for a year or two to kind of ride out the storm of the pandemic. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. There's going to be this, shadow inventory basically of these people who never really fully intended to own the home for an extended period of time. And once they realize how, challenging it is to maintain a home from a far distance, those homes are going to come back on the market. Those people will want to sell. So I think there's going to be a lot of that in the next I'd say 1 to 3 years, maybe at the latest 5 years. I think we're going to see a lot of that inventory come back. And as inventory rises, and if there's not enough buyers to absorb that, prices should come down. Simple supply and demand, So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. All right, Laura, let's start talking about mortgages because we're already at 12:28. I try to wrap this baby up within 30 minutes, but I'm not going to rush you through it.
All right. I got a key point from when you talked about cost of opportunity with regards to mortgage, that's a huge thing because as we know, the cost, well, as you may or may not know, the cost of obtaining a mortgage or the ability to do so is stemmed from credit, right?
Right.
Insurance policies and a lot of debt that we obtain today, the rate that you get is based on the credit score that you have. So when I hear cost of opportunity as a mortgage banker, the first thing that comes to mind is helping people repair their credit or raise their score so A, they have the ability to borrow money, and B, when they borrow money, they can get it at a lower interest rate. That's, we now have these mechanisms, these scoring mechanisms where I can take somebody who maybe has like a 600 credit score, and we can tweak their report with the help of this computer program called the Wayfinder and help escalate their credit score so that they can in fact become mortgageable. We don't want to see people missing out on opportunity as they're sitting there waiting 2 or 3 years potentially for their credit naturally just to improve itself. Mortgage bankers like myself have access to tools to help make that process occur sooner than later at an escalated rate.
Yeah, and that to me is a very important role that you as mortgage bankers play in the ultimate goal of having people, achieve the dream of home ownership. Like that's really important because a lot of people don't know where to go. So, we like to train all of our realtors that when they're first talking with somebody on the phone, do you have a mortgage professional that's helping you with the mortgage? And if not, kind of, give us an idea about your credit and income. And, if we feel that, they're not really mortgageable right now, let's get them into a program that can help them get there, right? Because whether they buy a home through us or not, it doesn't really matter. It's all about home ownership. It's good for everybody to achieve that. So that's
right.
good to know that you're doing that. In general, rates seem to be on the rise. I don't know that anything's really going to stop that. Do you agree?
That's hard to say, Jeff. I see the rates bubble up maybe an eighth or a quarter and then kind of trickle back down. I don't really see them going up really high, but I do see them on a slight increase. I would say the average 30-year fixed, again, going back to your credit score, which is a big part of how your rate is derived.
Sure.
You're looking somewhere around 3 1/8 or something like that for a 30-year fixed rate with an average credit score, which is still, unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
The rates are still at historic lows, no matter how you slice it or dice it.
Yeah.
If you can get an interest rate under 4%, it's still a great rate. So, I wouldn't let the interest rate rise scare people out of thinking that they're now priced out of purchasing the home.
Right.
I think that it's still going to be very enticing rates going into early 2022, personally.
Okay, that's good to know. But at the end of the day, we're not necessarily in an environment where rates are declining. They are going to most likely increase, albeit at not drastic amounts, smaller amounts, but they still might increase. So the point is, there's no reason to not want to buy now. in my opinion.
Absolutely not. The longer you wait, we always discuss this, you're not really buying the price of the house or the taxes. You're buying the monthly payment in total. So, you know, when you're looking at a house, whether you're looking at a $300,000 house or a $600,000 house, you're looking at the total monthly payment at the end of the day, more so than anything. So when you go back and you look at some, I've been in the market through those interest rates at 20%. And when you realize how much less of a house you can buy even at 4.5% from 3.25%. I mean, it reduces your purchasing power by $70,000 potentially, or $100,000. It's a big difference. So yes, it's an excellent motivating factor, which is why I'm encouraging people who have been on the fence, because they say, oh, if my credit score only gets another 30 points, then I can start looking. Let's accelerate that. Let's use these tools that we have to get your credit fixed sooner than later, so you can get out there and start shopping right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, Laura, do you have anything else that you want to add before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, again, cost of opportunity to me, like you say, people call with credit reports and they're looking to rent and realizing that the rent payments is $500 more than you can pay for a house. It's crazy. So I just think the more communication that we can do, more people that realize that talking to a mortgage professional and making sure that you are pre-approved, then get out there and start shopping, you know, but don't cut any quarters as far as getting the pre-approval first, because it is the most critical piece in the purchasing, unless you're paying cash, of course.
Right. Okay. All right, Laura, thank you very much. Let's just one last time here, go back and check out everybody's contact information. These are really fantastic people. If you're in the, you know, Hudson Valley region, the northerly suburbs, if you will, of New York City, Carol Buchanan can help you. Laura Moritz can really do mortgages all around the country. And Rob Lang down there in Kansas City, Kansas, and that surrounding area. There's their contact information. Definitely reach out to them. Thank you, everybody, for being here. The housing market update would be nothing without our panelists. So thank you for being here. And we hope to see everybody next month. Thanks so much.